So in today's video, we're going to be looking at a blog article that lists different examples of human sacrifice in the Bible. So let's get started. And if you haven't already and you like what we're doing here, make sure you subscribe to the channel below the video so you can get updated every single time we produce a new video. And if you're watching this video and you're already subscribed to our channel and you want to support us even further, we're going to post a couple of links down in the description box of different ways you can actually support us and help us continue to output videos like this going forward. So this video is based on a comment someone left on one of my videos a while back, and I decided that now is probably the best time for me to basically make a video just basically responding. He linked to a blog post which literally had all of these different examples about human sacrifice in the Bible. So we're going to literally run through all of these examples in today's video, and at the end of today's video we're going to focus on two special examples that were in that blog post, and we're going to basically handle them specifically at the end of this video. So make sure you stay to the end of this video so we can actually deal with those two as well. So the first example we're going to talk about in today's video is the claim that Israelites were to give their firstborn sons as an offering to the Lord. And that was referenced from Exodus chapter 22 verse 29 in the blog post. And I can understand, in all honesty, if someone says to you, look, go to Exodus 22:29 and you read it for the first time, and someone says to you the Bible is for human sacrifice, you're going to read that verse and you're going to say the Bible is about human sacrifice. So what I want to do first and foremost is, this isn't a video to bash someone over the head and say, you know what, you're an idiot, you're stupid, you're a clown, you don't know how to read the Bible, that kind of stuff, because that's not the case. In fact, these are the kind of questions and comments that I expect my kids to come to me at some point in the future and ask me and say, Dad, does the Bible really condone human sacrifice, or does the Bible teach about human sacrifice, and all these different things? And if I can't answer these questions in an honest, ethical way out of the Bible, then obviously there's going to be problems. So in regards to this first example here about Israelites offering up their firstborn sons as a sacrifice, in order for you to get the key context of what's actually happening here, you need to go and read Exodus chapter 13. And in all honesty, even if you read Exodus 12 before it, it probably gives you even better context. Because what happens in chapter 12 of Exodus is commonly known as the Passover. This is basically where God basically went through the land of Egypt, and literally all of the firstborn males and of animals were actually killed. And this was basically a huge judgment based on what the Egyptians were doing to the Israelites earlier in the book of Exodus, where they were basically killing all males that were born. That's what happens in Exodus chapter 12. And in Exodus chapter 13, God is basically telling the Israelites that, look, because I did this for you in Egypt, okay, now everyone, whether it's your firstborn son or the firstborn of an animal, is mine. So that's the specific context about what's being talked about in Exodus 22. But more so to the point, okay, when you read, and I advise you read the whole of Exodus 13, okay, but when you read verse 15, it gives you a clear example, because it says all of the males are to be redeemed. And what that basically means is, instead of God asking you to sacrifice your son on an altar as a human sacrifice, what you'd actually do is, in exchange of your son, you'd actually exchange your son for an animal. So this was known as being redeemed, so to speak. And you'll see the word redeemed throughout the Torah, okay, from Exodus all the way to Deuteronomy. So this kind of deals with this first example here, okay. God wasn't telling them to give up the firstborn son as an offering, as a human sacrifice. This was based on Exodus 13, where basically God was basically saying, look, every male that opens the womb will be redeemed via an animal. The next example from that blog article we're going to cover is basically covering all devoted should be killed, and that's based off Leviticus 27 verse 28 to 29. Now the first thing I'm going to recommend you do is refer back to Exodus 13, which we just covered in regards to the first example, because that's going to give you strong context about what we're talking about here in regards to being devoted. But more specifically to this specific example, all you have to do really, okay, is go back to the beginning of the text, because it gives you great context about what's actually going on here. Because in verse 2, what does it say? In Leviticus 27 verse 2, it gives you the context that it's talking about being redeemed via estimation. And it goes through different examples of men from 20 and up, from 60 and up example, from little kids, from men, from females. It talks about land in this chapter. It goes through different examples, and it always goes back to being redeemed via an estimation. What would actually happen is you'd actually substitute the person with some money, okay? So God wasn't asking for them in this particular example to kill children or kill men or anything like that. or kill any sort of human in regards to a sacrifice to God. Next, we're going to deal with this example of 16 virgins that ought to be sacrificed based on Numbers 31. And for this example, I literally have given you different examples for references which you can actually go over and actually see what's actually going on here. Okay, so the first thing you need to understand here, that this particular offering here was described in the scriptures as a heave offering. And the heave offering specifically was described in Exodus 29, verse 27 to 28, for Aaron and his sons. Now, I've given you some references for you to look at. You've got Leviticus 7, verse 14, Leviticus 7, verse 32, and Leviticus 7, verse 34. And I've also given you Leviticus 10, verse 14 to 15, Numbers 6, verse 20, Numbers 6 verse 15 and Numbers 6 verse 19 to 21. But the key piece of text I want to highlight for this specific example is Numbers 18 verse 15 to 17, where God basically says anything that opens up the womb, man or beast, is devoted specifically to the Lord. But also when you read Numbers 18, some other places you can actually read in that chapter to get some context is verse 8, verse 11, verse 19, verse 24, verse 26 to 30, and verse 32. So pretty much if you read the whole chapter, you're going to get great context, okay? But I definitely recommend you go to all of these different examples here so you can actually see, first and foremost, in Exodus 29, verse 27 to verse 28, that the heave offering was a specific offering which was for Aaron and his children, okay, etc. And they were supposed to eat it. So you read these different things here, you can clearly see through the context of reading these things that the 16 virgins were not going to be specifically sacrificed as a heave offering, okay? These examples here give you the example. Now, the next example in the cover is a really interesting one. It's one that we've just described as Saul's descendants, okay? And this is from 2 Samuel 21, verse 8 to 14. And the article basically claims that it took an offering in order to appease the Lord. But what actually happens if you get the context is, first and foremost, we see this example here of these people called the Gibeonites. And when you read about the Gibeonites, you should think immediately back to Joshua chapter 9. Okay, so I'm going to refer you back there because this is where you get the initial context of what's actually happening here with the Gibeonites. So the Gibeonites basically made an agreement with Israelites not to fight each other, but to be able to live together in peace. Okay, and they basically tricked the Israelites, if you refer back to Joshua chapter 9. But what basically happens here in 2 Samuel 21 is it gives us insights that King Saul at the time, while he was reigning as king, basically broke this agreement here that was set up and basically tried to wipe them out. So what God basically does for Saul's unjust act is he makes a famine come on the land, okay? Now when David, who's king now, basically comes to inquire of God and say, God, what's going on? Why is there this famine? God basically says to him, because Saul broke the agreement and tried to basically wipe out the Gibeonite. And basically what happens next is David says what should be done. So God basically says to David, go and address the Gibeonites to see what has to be done. So what the Gibeonites end up doing is they say to David, look, because Saul tried to wipe us out, we're not going to ask you to kill anyone. We want you to give us basically some of Saul's descendants. And they're basically going to kill those descendants. And the scripture talks about, specifically says, and they said they want to hang them up before the Lord. Now, some people say this is God requiring a human sacrifice. When you look at the finer details, what do we know? We know that the Gibeonites were not Israel, okay? You can get that from Joshua chapter 9, which I've kind of alluded to already, but you can see it from the context of 2 Samuel 21 to see that the Gibeonites were not Israelites. We also see that it was requested as justice to kill 7 men of Saul, even though Saul tried to wipe out all of the Gibeonites. And the key thing here is, they said they were going to hang them up before the Lord. God didn't tell them to hang them up before the Lord. They said they were going to do that. And obviously after they had actually killed them, justice had been served and the famine was actually gone. So it wasn't that God actually wanted human sacrifice or anything like that. This is what the Gibeonites decided for themselves. Another example taken from the blog post was Josiah burning people's bones on the altar. And what you're going to do is, first I'm going to recommend you go back the previous chapter to 1 Kings 12, but also reference 2 Kings 23 and 2 Chronicles 34 verse 1 to 8 for some additional context. And what you'll find in those examples is they were not sacrificing people, because when you read the context from these particular texts, you start to see that, like the previous example, is what was basically going on was there were these people that were offering crazy sort of sacrifices in the name of other gods on different altars. They were offering children and doing loads of different crazy stuff. The context gives you that. And what basically God says is, in regards to judgment, is he says, look, the way you've burnt these people, okay, and you've killed all these people and done this thing as some sort of offering, okay, for this false god, God says, you are going to be killed basically, and then your bones are going to be burnt on these same altars that you're doing these strange and crazy offerings on. So later on, as judgment, the people, the false priests and all these different people that were killing these people were in fact killed, and their bones were then in place, put on those same altars that they were doing these strange things, and actually were burnt, okay, as a judgment. But it wasn't a sacrifice to God or anything like that. Another example we had on the blog post was Jesus as an example. And just to kind of give you a quick rundown on this, Jesus was killed by the Romans at the behest of the Jews. So we've already kind of worked our way out of that example already. But more so to the point specifically, the fact of the matter is, if God exists, okay, which I believe he does, he, if just, should judge everyone. It's just the same law we apply in today's day and age. People do wrong and they are rightly punished, okay? Now, the fact of the matter is, what God does is he says, look, I know you're guilty. I know I should punish you for the unrighteous acts that you and me do on any given day. But what I'm going to decide to do is, when you come to court, I'm going to say, look, here's someone who's taken your place, who's paid your debt for you, is say, okay, you know what? I accept that payment, okay? And I walk free, okay? But if you don't decide to accept that payment, then obviously you're not going to walk free. You're saying, God, you know what, punish me. It's just that simple. If you believe that men, women, all of us all do wrong in this life, okay? If you believe that we should all be judged based on people doing things wrong, then why is it wrong for God to judge us if we do things wrong? Okay, it's not. Okay, so on that note, I'm going to recommend you literally accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior. Believe that in your heart, and the penalty that we all have to pay, okay, does not apply to you because you've accepted Jesus Christ as your payment for that debt you owe God. It's just that simple. Now, the last example we mentioned here, which was number 7 and number 8, which is something we said at the beginning of the video, we're going to come back to at the end and basically talk about it specifically, is Abraham being told to offer his only son Isaac in Genesis 22, and Jephthah potentially offering up his daughter as a burnt offering to the Lord in Judges chapter 11. The reason we didn't discuss these particular examples in these videos, even though in the blog post they were higher up, okay, Abraham's example is actually number 1 in this blog post, is because we've got standalone videos of both of these. If you want to know what happened in regards to Abraham and what happened in regards to Jephthah in regards to the context of the Bible, I'm going to recommend you watch these 2 videos right here. One is Abraham and one is Jephthah. And it's going to actually help you, give you the context of what actually happened in those scenarios. So make sure you watch those right now.